So whether you're looking to travel from New York to LA or just Vegas to Denver, today I'm going to be talking about the best ways to utilize your Capital One miles to travel domestically within the United States. I thought it'd be fitting to make this video as I just recently upgraded my Venture to the Venture X after many years of loyal Capital One membership. So right off the bat, we probably need to address the fact that Capital One doesn't actually have any transfer partners listed here on their portal that are actually located in the United States. That being any of the major airlines within the United States, which include American, Delta, and United. Now you might be wondering, if you want to utilize your Capital One miles to book flights on United, Delta, or American, how can I do that? I want to introduce you to a concept called airline alliances. Essentially, with the three major airline alliances, what you can do is transfer your Capital One miles over to any of the transfer partners you see listed here, which then map to one of the major American airlines, whether it's American Airlines, Delta, or United. Here you'll see the matrix for Capital One transfer partners for domestic airlines, which show you multiple options for, once again, each of these transfer partners that then allows you to book a flight on a domestic airline through one of these transfer partners. So how this works at a glance is that you have your Capital One miles that you've earned and accrued in your Capital One portal. Let's say you then want to book a United flight, but there's no way to actually transfer your miles from Capital One directly to United Airlines. What you would want to do is take your Capital One miles, transfer them over to a partner that they have, for example, Singapore KrisFlyer miles, and then through Singapore KrisFlyer miles, utilize them to then book that United flight that you're actually going to be traveling on. If you really boil it down, it's just a three-step process. It's super simple, and it gives you the opportunity to use your Capital One miles for much greater than a simple 1 cent per point value. That's not even considering the fact that award pricing is usually a lot better than the cash price for the same flights on the same dates. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the best value flights within the United States. I'm not sure why you need to fly in first class for a flight that's less than 5 hours. You're not even going to be sitting there for that long, so you're going to be okay. Once again, the three airlines I'm going to cover in this video for domestic travel within the United States are going to be American, Delta, and United. For each of these airlines, I'm going to give you guys two options that you can transfer your miles over to get the best value possible. So for our first airline, American Airlines, we're going to be looking at a flight option from New York JFK to Los Angeles LAX on Tuesday, January 9th. The first thing we have to do before we actually look at any of the transfers is to look at a benchmark price that we need to make sure our award pricing is going to be better than, so we're actually getting good value out of utilizing our Capital One miles versus actually booking that flight in cash on your Capital One card or any other credit card that you have. So if we do a quick Google search, we'll see that JFK to LAX on Tuesday, January 9th is about $150 one way. Now with this benchmark price of about $150 for a flight from New York to Los Angeles, what I also like to do is take a look into Capital One's travel portal to see what the price is there. Simply put, the easiest way to utilize your Capital One miles or any other points platform on any credit card service is to directly use them through their travel portal to book a flight directly with the card issuer. Now, if we take a look at the Capital One travel portal for the same flight from JFK to LAX on Tuesday, January 9th, we'll see that the price is the exact same for what the options were for the Google search that we just did. This, once again, is just a mental note of what the actual pricing is on Capital One travel, so we're not spending more than this by utilizing our miles to transfer them over before actually booking a flight. Now, the last thing I like to do is double check AwardHacker, and as you guys know from previous videos I've talked about, AwardHacker is still a great tool to utilize to see what the best options are for award ticket pricing with miles or points on various credit card platforms. But I do have to caveat that there are certain services in terms of different destinations and combinations of award tickets and transfer partners that might not be listed on AwardHacker. So this, once again, is just a reference point, so we can check back on this once we've done our searches for award pricing. Once again, the super quick analysis I like to do in AwardHacker is to plug in the exact same flight that I was looking for. Now, of course, AwardHacker assumes that this is standard award pricing and not dynamic pricing. So all the points pricing that's listed here is based off of standard award rates. And we just want to take a quick look at the first 3 to 4 to see if they're within the range of the prices that you're looking at for award tickets, and that you're getting at least this sort of transfer value by moving your Capital One miles over to an award partner. Now, once again, for our first airline being American Airlines, for a flight service from New York to LAX, a great transfer option is to transfer your Capital One miles over to Cathay Pacific Asia miles to then look for an American Airlines flight through their portal, which you can see here is about 10,000 points for that flight from JFK to LAX. Now, I do want to point out that Cathay Pacific has standard award rates, and so this 10,000 points is going to be any service from JFK to LAX, and it's not going to be dynamic pricing, which means the price fluctuates based off of the time that you're booking it and basically the demand and supply. Now, the quick valuation here is that 10,000 Asia miles on Cathay Pacific is about exactly 10,000 Capital One miles transferred over from their portal. At a 1 cent per point valuation, 10,000 miles is $100. And so if we go back to our reference for Capital One travel and from Google Flights, $100 is significantly less than the $158 it would cost to book this flight in cash. So right off the bat, you can say this is generally a pretty good option, aside from the fact that it's obviously not a direct flight. Now, once again, we just want to keep in mind the airline alliances. And so if you look at the flight code here, it says AS41 and then AS1180. And so AS is actually the airline code for Alaska Airlines, which I love flying Alaska. I have no problem with them, but just be aware that it's within the One World Alliance. And so because Cathay Pacific is part of this One World Alliance, you can then book flights on other airline partners within this travel alliance of One World. Now, to actually book this flight on American Airlines on this specific date, what you would need to do is go to your Capital One travel portal, go to Transfer Rewards, and then actually transfer your miles over by clicking on the Transfer Miles button from Capital One over to Cathay Pacific. Once again, we'll see here that 1,000 Capital One miles equals 1,000 Asia miles, and so that's a simple 1-to-1 ratio of a point transfer. But because you're getting that cheaper flight on Asia miles with oneworld, I would say that's a better valuation of utilizing your miles than actually booking it through Capital One Travel. Now, as I mentioned, I want to give you guys at least 2 options for each of these airlines I'm going to list. And so for American Airlines, our second option is going to be the same flight from JFK to LAX booked through British Airways by using Avios points. Now, if we do the same search on British Airways, we'll see that it's 13,000 Avios miles plus $5.60. Once again, the point transfer from Capital One over to British Airways is 1-to-1. And so at a 1 cent per point valuation, 13,000 Avios miles is about $130. Plus $5.60, that brings the total to $135.60 for this flight. Now, while this isn't as good value as the previous option from Cathay Pacific Asia miles, it is worth noting that this flight is a direct flight from JFK to LAX. And so if that's something that you care about, this exact flight from JFK to LAX simply is cheaper booked through miles versus actually in cash on Capital One Travel or just on Google. Now, if we get into the specifics, Cathay Pacific and British Airways has distance bands for how much they charge for a standard award pricing between different destinations within the United States. I would say, generally speaking, nonstop flights under 650 miles, British Airways is going to be your best bet, although the price once again scales with the distance within the United States. And then for flights under 750 miles, Asia miles or Cathay Pacific is probably going to be your best bet. Now, for British Airways, we want to do the exact same thing that we would for Cathay Pacific, which is to go to the Capital One portal and then transfer your miles at a 1-to-1 ratio from Capital One to British Airways. Now, the next airline I want to cover is Delta. And to be completely frank, there are not a ton of great options to transfer your miles, whether it's from Capital One or Chase or Amex, to utilize them for award pricing within the United States. I would say that for whatever reason, in the last few years, Delta has devalued some of the award rates that they offer, especially for travel within the United States, especially because of the fact that a lot of the options are going to be dynamic pricing once again, just in case you only fly on Delta and you really love their service and you have to transfer your miles over from Delta to a SkyTeam partner to book your flights on Delta. So the first option here, we're going to look at Virgin Atlantic. And so once again, Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Red are now merged, so your login should work for each. If we look at the same service from JFK to LAX on Tuesday, January 9th, we'll see that the first option here is 15,000 miles on Virgin Atlantic to book this Delta flight on January 9th. Now, once again, while this is a direct flight, it's not super great value, but it still is marginally cheaper than our booking in cash at $158 versus this $150 plus $5.60 being a couple bucks cheaper if you decide to go this route. The one thing to keep in mind is that if Capital One does promotions to any of the travel partners, so for example, if Capital One is currently offering a higher transfer rate from Capital One miles to Virgin Atlantic or Virgin Red, then this valuation of this 15,000 point flight would be a lot better than simply transferring at a 1-to-1 ratio and then using the 1 cent per point valuation for this 15,000 miles. Now, I was trying to do some research and analysis on different award pricing for different SkyTeam partners, and frankly, there weren't a ton of great options that give you really good value on your Capital One miles. But to give you guys that second option, that would be to transfer your miles over to Air France KLM, which is going to be the Flying Blue program. And as you'll see, this flight from New York to Los Angeles is going to be 17,500 miles plus $20.58, which brings the total valuation to almost $200 for this flight booked in miles at a 1 cent per point valuation. I would say that due to dynamic pricing, it can be difficult sometimes to find a Delta flight at really good value, especially if you're transferring your miles over from Capital One or any other portal. But I would say there can be some good options depending on the date and depending on the destination that you're traveling to. Now, for our third airline we're going to talk about in this video is going to be United Airlines, which offers a lot of services within the United States as well as internationally. But specifically for this video, I will say that United probably has some of the best valuations for the transfer partners that you can move your miles over to from Capital One to get the best value and best bang for your buck to book them for award pricing tickets. So the first option I want to give you guys for utilizing your Capital One miles to book United flights is to transfer them over to Avianca Life Miles and then search for a United option on there. Now, to be frank, I was getting pretty frustrated looking for these flights because initially I thought that JFK and LAX was the service that United offered, but it's actually from New Jersey at Newark Liberty Airport. And so I was getting really mad typing in JFK over and over and getting the same result until I realized that they don't fly out of JFK and rather it's out of Newark. So for this Newark to LAX flight, you'll see that it's 13,500 life miles. And once again, a transfer ratio of 1-to-1 from Capital One to life miles at a 1 cent per point value means that this is about a $135 flight plus $5.60 to give or take about $140. This once again is marginally cheaper than our benchmark rate of $158 for that same service from JFK to LAX that we saw previously. And now I hate to do this, but I saved probably the best bang for your buck last in this video. So if you've watched up until this point, you're in for a treat, and that is transferring your Capital One miles over to Turkish Miles and Smiles to then utilize them to book a United flight. Now the JFK to LAX flight still stands as a use case for Turkish Miles and Smiles because every single service within the United States, including Hawaii, is going to be 7,500 miles booked on Turkish Miles and Smiles for United Airlines. Let's just take a second to pause and realize what type of value that is. 7,500 miles at a 1-to-1 point transfer ratio from Capital One over to Turkish Miles and Smiles at a 1 cent per point valuation is $75. $75 to go anywhere in the US, like, come on, that is pretty damn good. Now, of course, there is no free lunch, and unfortunately, the caveat is that Turkish Miles and Smiles has probably the worst website UI, including their mobile application, just in general of any of the airline websites. They probably make it exceptionally difficult to book through their website because of how good of a value it is, and they're probably hoping that people will just give up because it's so difficult. Honestly, what I'm probably gonna do is make a video specifically about how to utilize the Turkish Miles and Smiles website because it certainly did not make me smile when I was searching for flights on their website, and I think it's pretty good value that you guys should be able to get if you can figure out their website. So in summary, it's really too easy to utilize your Capital One miles to book American, Delta, and United flights by transferring them over to transfer partners that give you really great value with standard award pricing to then be able to book them on the major American carriers for flights domestically here in the United States. If you guys got some value out of this video, make sure you drop a like down below, comment if you guys have any questions, or if you have any recommendations on specific services or other parts of transferring your points or miles from Capital One, Amex, Chase, or any of those options, because I now have all of the cards, especially now that I have the Venture X. I plan on using my Capital One miles for the maximum value that I can. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.